Hello and welcome back to the Sex and Healing podcast. I'm your host, Erin and thank you so much for joining me as we take this wild ride together through the realms of sex and healing. We have a very meaningful episode today, something that's very near and dear to my heart. We are going to be exploring the abandonment wound and what to do about it. As always, if you've been enjoying this podcast, I would love if you subscribe. If you feel called to, please leave a 5-star written review or share the episode with someone that you think this would be benefiting. That would mean a lot to me, and I'm sure that the person that might be struggling with this pain themselves will also greatly benefit from this information. So when I look at my world at the moment, at the time that we're recording this, I'm navigating a separation in my own relationship, and there's numerous couples that are going through breakups around me. And in all of those dynamics, there's at least one of those partners that has anxious attachment. When I look back at earlier relationships ending, and certainly my marriage, my 12-year marriage ending, the way that my anxious attachment and my attachment trauma showed up was one of the most painful experiences of my life, and the only experience I would say where I felt like I didn't want to live. That wasn't a desire to die or to do anything about it, but it was this overwhelming darkness and feeling like there was no hope. The pain was so immense that I didn't want to face that pain every day. And before my eyes even opened, before I even knew I was awake in the morning, that pain was there. And it was so excruciating, and I didn't know where to turn. I didn't believe that anyone was capable of helping me. It's just such an immense pain to lose that thing that you love, that person that you have become attached to, who's become your safe person in the world. So when I look at my own growth over the time since my marriage ended to who I am now, I have certainly come so far. I'm so proud of how I'm navigating myself through this current separation. And I really see so much secure attachment being demonstrated in myself. I see a really healthy and conscious navigation of a separation. And that gives me hope, and I hope it gives you hope too. That there is something that we can do about this. Identifying it obviously is so important, but then there are actually ways that we can create positive change. So when I look at these other people in my world who are anxiously attached, who are going through a separation, and particularly one couple who I helped coach through the ending of their relationship, I really saw the markings of what I remember in myself of being an addict. That anxious attachment feels like a drug addiction. That person becomes the source of all of your love and all of your safety and all of your hope. And the thought that you're losing that becomes a panic inside. And from that place comes some really toxic behaviors, some really pain-inducing behaviors. And it's almost like you're willing to throw out every single fucking tactic you can find inside of yourself. It's like every little hook, everything that makes you think that you could retain this person or retain the love in some way comes out. And it really can show some of the darkness inside of us when these opportunities arise. So it's been a beautiful opportunity for me to witness it outside of myself, as an opportunity for me to reflect and see how far I've come, but also to be able to offer that guidance and support to other people that are so deep in that attachment trauma showing itself. And also with the absolute knowing that I have within myself that these are the moments that define our healing. That without these opportunities to see the deepest parts of our pain and these attachment wounds, we don't have a way to heal it. So as painful as these circumstances are, if we can move towards these moments with the knowing that this is a gift, that we get to see it, that we get to learn about ourselves in this way, and that we can actually start to heal and change from that place, then we do actually want these moments to come up in our life. I know that in the moment, in that pain, we just wish that anything would take it away and we could be soothed and we could be comforted and we could have the love return, the safety return, whatever it is that we perceive. But just know, if you're in one of these moments where this shit is showing itself, it's because it's your time for healing. It's giving you an opportunity to see what's deeply hidden inside your psyche. And that is a beautiful gift, because on the other side of that is relationships that are so much healthier, so much more fulfilling, so much more secure and safe and grounded. And all of these feelings that you are outsourcing through the other person become something that you can hold within and that you can be the source of, which allows you to love so much more freely and so much more openly. So in order to really dive deep into this topic, I'm getting goosebumps before I even introduce her. My favorite, the one and only Peta Woolan. Welcome, Peta.
My goodness, Erin, it's always a pleasure. And I'm so glad to be here. And you know how passionate I am about talking about this.
Yes, I know. I feel like you're in my corner. Like sometimes I feel like I'm in a battle against life. You know, life is just throwing me lesson after lesson. And I have this team of people behind me that are providing me with the hope and the courage and the tools. And I'm just so fucking glad to have you in my corner, Peta. You give me goosebumps everywhere. I'm so glad that you are a voice for my audience and they related to you so well. Your interview earlier in our podcast, season 1, is the most listened to episode so far. It really, the way that you teach, the quality of the knowledge that you have, it just brings so much value. And I'm just so fucking excited for whatever goodness you're going to unfold for all of us, myself included, as we sit here and listen and learn from all of your wisdom. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. And like we spoke about on that first podcast, most of the women that I work with as a breakup coach do identify with this really painful experience, which we now know is fear of abandonment or anxious attachment, and some of the subtypes of that, which we're going to obviously dive in and really unpack and give some incredible, I guess, a pathway for healing this today for those of you who have really struggled with this.
Oh, I feel that so much. I feel the truth in that this, like, and I'm seeing it in my own life, as I just explained in the introduction, like I'm seeing how this work does create change and this hope that we don't have to feel that again. But I love what you just said then. It's, we don't even know that it's necessarily a fear of abandonment. I never would have said I had a fear of abandonment until this year when my partner helped me see it. And I can go back and apply that lens to my entire life. And I thought, fuck, I have been abandoned in so many ways, in so many circumstances. And I just didn't see it as such. What I knew it to be when my marriage was breaking down was just immense pain and loss. And I thought I was losing the person I loved. And that kind of pain was warranted by the fact that I'm going to lose the person I love. I didn't recognize that it was abandonment underneath that. So what is it exactly? What is the abandonment wound? What is abandonment?
It's really difficult to understand. But first of all, I'll explain like how we actually notice, like what are the symptoms. And
Right.
usually we'll have a lot of anxiety, specifically when it comes to losing someone who is very close to us, someone that we've bonded with, primarily our intimate partner. And when they sort of step away, or particularly at the end of a relationship, we almost have this irrational, our body goes into this irrational fear. It feels like we're actually dying.
It
Right?
does. I've felt that life or death moment, absolute panic, like I'm going to die.
Yeah. And we have these different strategies, which I'm going to talk about how we cope with that. But the reason why we have this fear of dying is actually it stems back from, we understand from evolutionary biology that we have a neurological strategy. It wasn't safe for us in early times for us to be cast out from the tribe, to have to fend for ourselves. So it's actually an adaptive strategy to activate our nervous system. We understand more through polyvagal theory, if anyone's familiar with that, but to activate our nervous system so that we do whatever it takes to be able to stay safe within the tribe. So it's really a safety issue, a survival issue. And if we break up from a partner, it's very rare that our life is actually in danger. But I tell you what, it definitely feels like that fear of dying. It feels like our life is in danger. And some of the behaviors, I can talk a little bit about some of the things that I've done and friends and clients have done. It feels really irrational.
Absolutely. I would say the same. And when you're not in it, you look back and you can't relate to that moment anymore. And you think, oh, don't be silly. Like, of course, like it's fine. It's just a breakup, or you're witnessing someone else go through it. And it's like, no, it's a good thing. You need to get out of this relationship. Don't worry. But when you're in it and your brain and your biology are responding that way and the nervous system is activated like that, like you're looking at a completely different reality. And I saw this in a client recently. It was like, eyes darting around the room, you know, like unable to be present. And I could notice, even as I was speaking, the brain wasn't listening to what I was speaking. It was trying to find more evidence to prove itself. And it wanted to hear a certain thing from this client. And I was like, there's this entire being right now is in a completely altered reality because this has gone off and there's such a panic inside. You could see, and that's, you know, what I identify in the addict as well, who needs that hit. There's this desperation of, I need to solve this right now, or I feel like I'm going to die.
And I also want to normalize this as well for those of you that identify with having this feeling of anxiety and panic when we potentially lose a partner or a loved one, or even just sense that something's wrong in our relationship. I mean, there's a lot of shame that goes around this. There's been numerous times I've had an argument with my partner, and then I've literally found myself hysterical, like on hands and knees, begging them not to leave. And, you know, and there was a situation I used to live in Armadale in Melbourne, and a girlfriend used to live 5 minutes away. And I got a call from her, like, and I couldn't even make out what she was saying. It was 3 o'clock in the morning, and she was like, like hyperventilating. And I went around to her house. There was police cars in her court.
Wow.
And I went inside, and she just had a fight with her boyfriend, but he threatened to leave and drive back to his house, and just hell broke loose. She ended up like lifting the bonnet of his car and pulling out all of the hoses and cords underneath his bonnet, and she was curled up in the fetal position in her bedroom with the police trying to get inside her house when I found her. So, you know, for anyone who has any shame over the way that they've behaved at the end of the relationship because this nervous system situation has really taken over, I want to kind of, I mean, this is not healthy behavior, obviously, but I want to let you know that there's a reason why these things happen, why this behavior happens. And we can heal it for sure.
Oh, thank you so much for saying that. And, you know, I even see it happening in very early stages, even in the dating phase, that you can start to feel connected to someone, you can get your hopes up. And then when something shifts and changes, like they start texting less, or there's been some sort of shift. And as soon as that goes off, that can already start to set in the anxiety of anxious attachment. So it doesn't even have to be at the end of an established relationship or losing a married partner or a significant other. It can show up very quickly.
Yeah, it's an absolutely horrible feeling to send the text message out, and then the I guess the rabbit hole that your mind goes down when you're expecting something in return. It can be so distracting, like you can literally not even be able to focus on work or whatever it is. And that, I guess, is one of the attributes that we will dive into a little bit deeper about suffering from anxious attachment, is we have learnt to outsource this self-soothing ability to the people around us in our external environment, and we haven't actually built up successful strategies or tools in able to manage that nervous system response. So that's just one part of coping with and managing having this experience.
So does everyone who has an abandonment wound or have this fear of abandonment, would they all have been abandoned at some point in their life? Is that what this is all about? We can track back and find the event or events where this started?
Yeah, really good question. Look, not always. Sometimes there is a really obvious event. So particularly in childhood, you know, we would all remember if, you know, the day that mum and dad had a massive fight and dad left and never came back, or we might all remember something that's related to abandonment as a trauma in a childhood, but not always. Sometimes this can happen between the ages of 0 to 2, and it can be as simple as, you know, mum and dad just dropping me at my grandparents or giving me over to friends, and my needs not being able to be attended to as a young child or a baby in that moment. So we won't have any obvious memory of that. And then there's also, you know, the potential for some of this abandonment trauma, so to speak, to have happened in the placenta, so pre-birth, or potentially ancestral trauma, now that we know more about epigenetics, or past lives even. So
now you're speaking my language, girl. I absolutely can validate all of that. But yes, it happened. Well, my personal circumstances here in this lifetime, but yeah, so many layers of this healing, which is why our soul came here to have these experiences now, to pick up what's happening in our soul through multiple lifetimes. And we're lucky enough to be at this level of consciousness and have access to these kind of resources to heal it. And the healing cascades back in the same direction. You know, we heal our ancestral line when we do the healing, and we heal our past lives and that unresolved stuff that sits in our soul that makes us come back and continually choose these lifetimes of suffering. So that's amazing to hear. I didn't realize that we shared similar beliefs around that. So yay.
Yeah, and it's important to understand that most people, when they think of abandonment, they actually think of the most recent experience or painful experience in their relationship history, someone that they really loved and they left, and then you have to pick all the pieces of your life up, and it's really devastating. But usually it's, I mean, that can actually compound things and make this abandonment wound feel worse. But it almost always stems from something well before that. In fact, we often, without healing this abandonment wound, are going to attract someone who's potentially going to just repeat that same cycle over for us. That's why it's so important to heal this.
Exactly. And on a soul level, our little soul says, fuck, I've not healed this abandonment thing so many fucking lifetimes. All right, I'm going to do it again. I'm going to go down there and I want to get abandoned and I want to fucking heal this once and for all. And the souls that love us the most say, I'm going to come with you, babe. I'm going to do that for you. I'm going to abandon you to give you that opportunity for healing. You know, we often don't see it like that. We can feel like we're a victim to the people that hurt us. But from a higher level of consciousness, we can actually shift that perspective and say, that person is serving me. That person is giving me the greatest opportunity in this lifetime to heal. When I look back at some of those moments of profound forgiveness in my life, you realize that there's nothing to forgive. You have nothing but gratitude for the way that things unfolded and the role that everyone played, because all of that led you to becoming who you are here to be. And without that, it never would have been the case. I just saw these people as angels, the people that I felt so hurt by and so tormented by. And I remember the day when I realized they were fucking angels and they were willing to come and play an unpleasant role in my life and carry the burden of being that person in order to serve me and my soul growth. Like, what a fucking gift.
It's definitely very obvious in you, Erin, how much work you've done around forgiveness. For a purely anxiously attached person, forgiveness is not as much of an issue, but someone who tends more towards what we call fearful avoidance. So that's actually a combination of anxiously attached and sometimes avoidance, or actually fear of engulfment, fear of being controlled. That the disordered attachment, or what we call fearful avoidance, often stems from both issues with perhaps being abandoned, having a lack of emotional bond with our father, but also some sort of either enmeshment or having a mum that was perhaps emotionally unstable. So the combination of both of those things tend to mean that we can have a lot of fluctuating experiences as far as our attachment. And for those people in particular, having forgiveness for those earlier experiences and all the challenges that brings into adulthood is a very, very important piece. Forgiving mum, forgiving anybody else that was involved in that family dynamic is extremely important for a fearful avoidant.
Yeah, forgiveness is I don't think I applied myself to learn forgiveness necessarily or said I want to go and do this. There was just such a desire inside of myself to heal, to not carry the weight, the shackle of pain around my heart. I remember this moment that I felt, it was towards my dad, and just recognizing this exact thing. Like, he gave me life here on this planet. He gave me my path that I walk today because of all this hardship and adversity. And this fucking heavy, dark energy just dropped away from my heart, and this beam of white light just shone out of me, and I saw his soul, and I had nothing but love and gratitude for that. And it was Father's Day, actually, and I just recognized that I have that love inside of me, that thing I was seeking from this man who was incapable of giving it to me, this lack that I'd felt my whole life of just wanting and yearning something from him. I went inside and I felt it. I felt that love, that fatherly love, the protector, the safety. And yeah, it just dominoed out into this moment of forgiveness when I was kind of laughing, thinking there is nothing to forgive. This is all so divinely perfect. And I went and lay under the trees and asked the wind to blow the pain out of my heart, because I was releasing like years and years and years of that pain that I'd carried. And so my desire is to just have a good life, to feel good. I don't want to feel bad. I don't want to be carrying the pain of resentment towards others, because it impacts my life experience and it doesn't feel good. And I'm a hedonist like that. I just want to feel good all the time. So the subsequent result of that is forgiveness, a very high level spiritual ideal of forgiveness. So I feel very lucky.
It's an extremely important part of the healing process. I think a lot of people are resistant to forgive because they feel perhaps that makes what someone else did okay, or that they're doing it for someone else, but just remembering that it's actually all for you. But like a lot of these other concepts that we talk about, trust, forgiveness, it's much easier to conceptualize than to actually do in practice.
Yes.
What was it that you think really enabled you to put forgiveness in as a practice?
Gosh, it felt like a very spontaneous experience, actually. I think it's just committing to the knowledge that it can be different and know that healing is possible. And then we can't force it. We can't push ourselves to forgive before we're ready. That's actually very abusive towards ourselves. We're not respecting our boundaries. We can be putting ourselves into situations that are unsafe. Like, I don't have contact with my dad. It's been 2 decades. And my forgiveness doesn't mean that we go back and become friends, or I let him back in my life in any kind of way. It's an internal experience. So I think once we do understand it as a concept, genuinely understand it and want it for ourselves, and we just keep showing up for ourselves, and it will naturally happen when the time is right. And until then, it's just about having love and compassion for ourselves and being okay. Like, there's other things in my life that I haven't completely forgiven. Like, I still feel a pain in my heart when I think about certain things, and I still carry a judgment towards something else in my life that really fucking but I'll get there. We'll all get there. It's just commit to doing the work and it will happen naturally. So Peta, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, you're right. You go.
I'm really curious about how, like, I identified this abandonment wound at the end of relationships or when the crisis is happening. What kind of signs are there for people who might be able to identify? How's it showing up for them behaviorally? How are their relationships being impacted prior to these crisis moments? Is there an opportunity to see this inside of ourselves earlier and be able to do something before we get to the point we think we're going to fucking die?
Yeah, definitely. And one thing that I want to comment about that too, sometimes when we've carried this fear of abandonment or this anxiously attached style into multiple relationships, it can get to the point where we actually don't even know is this my stuff that I'm bringing to relationship and causing the dynamic, causing him to pull away or causing myself to feel anxious, or is this just an unhealthy relationship? Like it almost starts to compound so much that we go into a new relationship. It starts
so
with
true.
the same pattern, and then we're like, fuck, is this me? Or am I with the wrong person? And it can be really confusing. But generally, if you're feeling unsafe in the relationship, so if it feels unsafe for him to go away for the weekend, if it feels unsafe for him to not call you for 24 hours, if you're starting to notice your nervous system, you just can't relax, you can't focus on what you're doing, then it's pretty much a green light that there's some abandonment fears that need to be looked at.
Mm-hmm. And so what might be the indicator that it is an unhealthy relationship or a toxic relationship, and it's more important to perhaps step away from the relationship? Well, this is exactly where I got to within myself now that I'm saying this out loud. I was working on myself. Fuck. How, like, this is a lot of fucking work and I'm still not getting to the end. And then I was like, oh, I wasn't meant to be okay with this. This is actually not in line with my relationship standards. It's time for me to step out, rather than taking the that's my tendency, is to think, oh, it's something, a fault inside of me that I need to work on and strive at working, rather than being able to get to that point where I was like, oh, it's okay to be triggered about that. It's very good that you're triggered about that, because that's indicating to you that this isn't meeting your relationship standard versus thinking it was my wounding. So do you have any indicators for people? How do they recognize that it is an unhealthy relationship?
It's really nuanced. And the reason is because we're not actually, we're not actually in a fixed style, right? We're all on this continuum. So in the middle of the continuum is the securely attached position. Mm-hmm. Towards one end, we have sort of an anxiously attached style, and then there's the avoidance style. As we know, the avoidant style and the anxiously attached style are often highly attracted to each other, and the degree to which we experience, I guess, the unhealthy aspects of these styles, it will polarize us out towards the end. So it also depends on the style of your partner. But what we know is someone who's highly avoidant and highly anxious, they're often, no matter how much work they do, it's very difficult for them both to be able to meet in the middle in a secure place. But there's lots of different ways we can know the relationship is unhealthy. But one of the easiest ones that I've noticed is if you sit down and have a conversation with your partner where you're raw with your emotions, not blaming them, but just letting them know how you feel. A secure partner is going to lean in and say, oh, I'm really sorry. I would never have wanted you to feel like that. This is not my intention. How can we change things? Right? Whereas an avoidant, an insecure, or an unhealthy partner might not necessarily be that supportive or open to that conversation. They will often say, oh, what do you mean? Or, don't be stupid, or I can't believe you're reacting like that. They're going to try and minimize your feelings, not be open to seeing how we can work together to come to some kind of resolution about what's caused this disconnection in the relationship. And they'll be potentially quite dismissive. So I think that's probably the easiest way when you're in a relationship to kind of know, when I show my emotions, is that other person dismissing me or pulling away or just leaving, and do we not deal with things adequately, and he goes away for a couple of days and then we pretend nothing happens. How he or your partner, he, she, whatever, is responding to your emotions is very telling, I think, in terms of the health and the potential of the relationship.
Interesting. This is a slightly unrelated question, but I'm curious to know what your thoughts are. My ethos is never settle. I want to empower women everywhere to ask for more and to seek more and to not settle. I see that as a very, very, very common pattern that women are settling in relationships. There's a few people that I've shared that with who are not necessarily clients, but they're more friends. They would have skills as coaches or counselors or, like kind of more on a closer playing field to my mindset than maybe what my clients would come to me with. And a few people at that level have said to me, well, we have to stop placing all these expectations on others. We have to stop expecting our partner to be everything for us. And they've kind of resisted my concept of never settling. And I can understand that from the perspective if we have super high standards and that's not how we're showing up in relationship, but you just keep telling your man that he's got to do work on himself and he's got to show up better and, projecting that all on him. Yeah, that's problematic. But in that dynamic where you've got some wounds that you're working on and your partner's got some wounds that they're working on too, like we can't place it on them to be perfect all the time, and they have to show up as secure when our attachment wounding is going off. Where do you kind of sit on that spectrum between don't settle and get out of this relationship if their attachment trauma is going off because, hey, my attachment trauma is going off and I need someone secure to help me, versus we're going to stay and stick it out even though we can notice that we both have these unhealthy, or perhaps that's not even the other option because not everyone's with a partner that's even going to have that kind of conscious conversation. But I've just kind of blurted out a whole lot of crap there, and I don't know if you even know what the answer is what I was trying to express, but I really hope I expressed myself clearly enough.
I'll answer it as best I think was something will be valuable. Definitely doing this work individually in order to contribute to the health of the relationship obviously means we have our own process and we might need to be and go within to do that. but is it still evident in your partner that they value this third entity in the relationship? So if you think of a triangle, there's you and him, and then there's the entity of the relationship that's equally as important, and that's obviously a really healthy relationship. Is he still as invested and as committed to that third entity, that relationship, or is it now just about him, or is it just about you? So looking for the signs of that. Is he still, it's like when you both open up a bank account together, right? And you're both investing in this joint bank account. One person just taking and not investing, or are you both not investing in it anymore, and it's reaping no dividends? Like, think about the relationship as something that you're equally as committed to, and do you still see signs that he's doing that? And also the other one that is really simple, but are his actions and his words matching up?
Oh, girl, you're speaking my fucking language. These are two massive things for me. Are you my equal in this commitment? And two, don't fucking tell me what you're going to do. Just do it, because your actions are the truth of who you are. You can give me all the nice words in the world and all the verbal commitments, but if that's not how you're showing up, then it doesn't matter. I'd love to hear you say those things. My further question then, just to apply to my own personal situation, I invest like a motherfucker. I put in more work into these kind of things than the majority of people on the planet. So is it a realistic expectation that I find someone else that's investing like a motherfucker? Or am I better to kind of invest a little less, or loosen my grip on that expectation that I want someone that's working alongside me like a fucking gun, ruthlessly, relentlessly improving themselves? Should I be more okay with people where they're at? Or is there someone else on the planet that's as relentless as me? Help, Peta, help me.
And there is no one that can help you with this, Erin. The only person that can decide whether the dividends of this investment match up with what you want to commit and invest in the relationship. Only you can decide if it's enough.
Look, my heart says, have hope, Erin. Do not lose hope. If you exist, your equal exists. Like, yes, I might pave the way and demonstrate. Like, my beautiful friend came with me recently to do something really thoughtful for my man. And she was helping me ride around Bali and getting all these things together. And she said, wow, you blew my mind today and have completely up-leveled my understanding of what it means to be thoughtful. And I was like, oh, wow, that's really sweet. I just think I'm Erin being Erin. And she's like, yeah, but you thought about that detail and that detail and that detail. And like, the length that you went to be thoughtful for someone else was just really impressive to me. And so I know now that she's going to walk away into her life with higher expectations around thoughtfulness, being able to be more thoughtful for others, but also to hold that space that someone can be that thoughtful towards her more than what she had ever experienced. So I understand that when I get into relationships, being the fucking warrior that I am, I might be setting the standard. People might be like, wow, I've not seen someone show up in a relationship like that. I've not seen someone invest in themselves in that way before. And then that can allow for this expansion and this equal commitment, maybe beyond what someone's committed before. So my heart says, do not lose hope, do not settle, do not accept less than that, because you can absolutely have that. It's just in my moments of weakness or loneliness or sadness, as you're navigating all the emotions that come, that there is this little voice that's like, oh, should I accept less? Am I asking for too much? Should I just be happy with what I've got? Because it's still better than what everyone else has. There's just that, battling with the angel and the devil on my shoulders of that part of me that says, keep going. Don't doubt for a second that you will be met in your entirety, versus the part of me that's like, oh, but it was still pretty good.
I think when we're in a beautiful, harmonious relationship, we feel like we've been seen and we've been met, and our needs are being met. It's like turning a tap on. So the love, we can essentially access an infinite source of love, and it feels really good. It feels really in flow to be able to express that love and share that love and be really thoughtful and generous. It's only when something becomes out of alignment, when there's a disconnect or there's an energetic mismatch, that we start to turn the tap off, and we start to, it's like checks and balances. It's like, okay, my love cup is, I'll give you some of my love and then you sort of make sure that they're giving some in return. So it's less about what I'm actually doing for you and whether I'm giving that in return, and more about, can I get back to that harmonious state where felt really good for me to just turn that love tap on and to not have to worry about, am I getting or giving enough in return?
Yeah, it's just that natural reconciliation that's happening, and the give and the take. And I think another really key component here is knowing what our highest values are and what are our not negotiable values, and what are the ones that we can be a little bit flexible on and say, yeah, sometimes I'm not met in that realm, even though there's times that I am and there's times that I'm not. But these key components that make up who I am and the values I live life by, I get met there. And this propulsion inside of me to heal and to grow and to overcome, that's just something that's never going to waver. So for me, I'm like, that is what I want. I want my fucking equal galloping down this path with me, moving through things with the same dedication, and maybe not even the same speed, but the same fucking dedication to that, this unwavering commitment to show up as our best selves and our highest selves, and to overcome whatever challenge is before us.
And just another reminder, we did speak about this in our last podcast, but the incredible feeling that we feel in a relationship is what we're generating from within. So you being inspired by that relationship to show up as the best version of you and be fully expressed in this thoughtfulness and generosity, that's making you feel good. And that's all the feelings that you're generating from within. It's not actually about what he's giving you. It's how safe it feels for you to feel, to generate that feeling, that unconditional loving feeling from within.
Yeah, and be the most thoughtful bitch on the planet. Anyone is so fucking lucky to receive my love. I tell you what, there is just so much. If you've been held in the field of my love, especially my romantic love, fuck, you can't not change. That's some powerful shit to receive, the fucking velocity of love that comes from me. Well, this is all so fucking awesome. And you know that I could sit here and talk about this stuff all day, but let's get to the really fucking juicy, good shit. Peta, how do we heal this? Help us, please. What can we do?
It's definitely a journey, not a quick fix for sure. I think most people are going to be well aware of that. But depending on if you have a really obvious trauma, if there are events that happen in your life that immediately send you back to a previous abandonment situation, then definitely I think a therapeutic approach. So get yourself in therapy and work on the trauma around that specific abandonment event. For most of us, that's not going to be necessary. Right. This is just this fear of an abandonment is just a strategy that we've picked up, through, as we talked about, through potentially different earlier experiences in life. And so what I think is there's sort of a 3-step approach to really being able to manage this and create healthy relationships without the anxiety and the fears and the insecurities creeping in. The first one that I've mentioned already is learning how to self-soothe. When I start to notice myself feeling anxious or start to notice this, and we would call it a hyperactivation because it's completely unrealistic to the actual situation that's occurring, learning how to self-regulate, because most of us that have this, unless you've done a lot of work, actually don't know how to self-regulate. You usually outsource that to someone else calming you down, getting that text message back from someone that makes you feel, oh, okay, everything's okay. So whatever strategies you need to be able to learn how to do that. What were some of the strategies with the recent experiences of anxiousness that you've used, Erin, that have helped you?
You know, my physical environment has a really big impact on my sense of safety. So it was coming back into my little cocoon, into my nest, getting in bed, wrapping myself in a blanket, and actually just blocking out a lot of the sensory input that was coming in. So sleep is a massive help for me. Having girlfriends around. I actually did buy Valium. I haven't needed to take one, thank God. But if I hit that extreme point again, I would actually consider taking a Valium, you know, that absolute panic point. But for the general fears, I find cocooning myself, switching off for a moment in time, like relieving myself of the pressure to work, you know, the constant CEO chat that worries about my business, like giving myself freedom from that. I love to eat very calming, grounding, warm food. And then perhaps I could distract myself even with a soothing movie, nothing violent, nothing graphic. And it's almost like I'm just putting pause on life, taking myself into this little altered reality where everything's okay and I'm warm and I'm safe and I'm eating and I'm comforted and I sleep. And that almost hits the reset button. And then the next day I can kind of look back with a bit of objectiveness and say, okay, what was going on there? What was underneath that? You know, if I have a girlfriend here, then actually even essential oils have been fucking fantastic. I have chanting on, like very soothing music. I'm just looking for all of these things, every sense of mine to come into a sense of comfort.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All of those things are wonderful. And what we have to realize is that this feeling of anxiousness is, once it's activated, once our nervous system is activated into the fight, flight, or freeze response, it's in our body.
Mm-hmm.
So we tend to try and use our mind to kind of land on a different thought that might make us feel a bit better. We go down this rabbit hole of like thinking of trying to land on something that feels safe or rationalize what it is that we're going through to be okay. But once it's actually in our nervous system, in our body, then we have to approach that self-soothing from that place.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be different from different people, but it's generally whatever it is that you can do that helps to lower that activated feeling of your nervous system. So anything that's calming, relaxing, meditation, somatic body work, breathing, different types of breathing techniques or strategies. In NLP, what I often like to do is anchor in for my clients a state that they can readily access, a state of where they already feel safe and supported, accepted, and anchoring that in so they can fire off that anchor right in those moments. To it's actually activating the I guess the parasympathetic nervous system. That's what I was trying to say. Yeah.
Exactly. And I'm a very sensitive being energetically. So I can really sense in myself very quickly what's happening there in my nervous system, but also in others. And you do see the majority of people in the Western busy world living in an activated sympathetic nervous response all the time. And then that becomes normal to them. They don't actually have a state of complete relaxation and rest from that. So if you're in that state all the time and then you add some anxious attachment on top of that, then we've got some real problems. So these kind of skills to get ourselves to that place of peace and calm, to be able to be in control of our nervous system and not the other way around, is necessary for life. I notice actually having my phone on too much has a massive impact on my nervous system. So if I'm in a state like that, I need to have no devices around me, no one trying to get my energy or attention. It's like to not have my phone on for a day and to just be in nature and just to enjoy the Saturday without worrying about what time it is. Like that's been really profound for me actually recently. And I was like, girl, you got to have this in your life all the time. This can't be a rare experience. We need to be treating our nervous system this well all the time.
Yeah, the two things that I personally notice make a difference for me are sleep. My resilience level, my ability to be able to manage any degree of stress in my environment is is completely related to how much sleep I've had, and also how much I'm meditating. So I know that if my meditation practice has been a bit lackluster over a few weeks, then my resilience to stressful things in my environment, and this includes activated attachment, is much less. So just a reminder for anyone, I know it sounds really simple, but if you're struggling with these issues in your relationship or in your environment, it's absolute priority. Make sure the quality of your sleep is good.
Absolutely. It's life or death to me. I'm a completely different person. People will know immediately, like, uh-oh, Erin's tired and cranky. And then sometimes I can sleep for, like, after a big weekend a couple of weeks ago, I came home and slept for 13 hours. Like, I had a 2-hour nap, woke up and had some dinner and slept for another 13 hours. And that was a real indicator to me what was going on in my nervous system. If my body needed that much in order to rebalance itself, I knew I was carrying a huge stress load in my nervous system. And you learn to tolerate it and adapt to it. So if you're a strong and capable and intelligent person, often you just keep pushing through, when actually we need to stop and release. So what's the difference then between soothing and healing?
Right. So self-soothing is the ability to be able to self-soothe is the first skill that I would recommend people approach. The second aspect to managing and healing anxious attachment is the healing of the abandonment issue. Right? Is finding, how do I feel safe and not actually be activated as often or as strongly with this fear of abandonment. And that's going to look a lot different for everyone depending on the source or sources of what your abandonment is. So if it's an obvious abandonment event or a big T trauma that happened, then it's actually going to be easy because you would go straight in and focus on the healing that's involved with that. So trauma-informed therapy, or there are lots of different modalities that can help with trauma. I use NLP and theta healing, but there's, hypnotherapy, any type of energy medicine. There's lots of different modalities that can help with a particular abandonment event. But oftentimes it involves going even back further, recollecting memories that we might not even have of trauma experiences, or where that fear of abandonment actually came from. So this is where it depends on how far back it actually comes from. You might do some inner child healing work, but that might not actually be enough. Your abandonment strategies might have actually come from even earlier than that. You might have to do some ancestral healing, some womb, you might have to go back to past lives.
Yeah, when I think about, so I just did my anxious attachment quiz again to get my results just last night, and I'm 70% secure now, which is fucking amazing. I still had 10% anxious, 10% avoidant, and 10% fearful avoidant showing up. And that's potentially the best, aiming for that is a fucking fantastic thing. And knowing that I have to work on this for the rest of my life. It's not something that's healed and it's gone. I'm always going to have this anxious attachment strategy inside of myself. And I have to make very conscious choices the whole way to just keep that in check. Like I was an addict when I was around 19 or 20. I was addicted to hard drugs, but I would not identify myself as an addict now. But I still have to be very aware that that's inside me. And if I don't make good choices about it, that addictive behavior could come out again in another way. So knowing that at the moment in this circumstance, I'm identifying as 70% secure feels freaking amazing. And when I look back at what are the things that have helped me with that, definitely a lot of inner child work. I had multiple events of abandonment, physical abandonment, and also a lot of emotional abandonment, which is probably the most painful, is to say, well, there's people around me and I'm still in so much pain and no one's protecting me, or I'm trying to speak up for myself and no one's doing anything. But then I also realized that with my mum's battle with depression and her suicidal tendency, that felt like an abandonment every time too, that it was there in my adult life as well, continually triggering this thing. When my marriage ended, that was a big trigger for it. And then I realized a lot of the relationships that I got into after my marriage they were actively triggering it because of their avoidant behaviors. When their avoidant tendency would go off, it felt like abandonment to me. Like that person that was there emotionally connected to me and supporting me, when their strategy went off, then that triggered my trauma. So I recognize now that this most recent relationship with a securely attached person, someone that said, I'm not going to abandon you. I see that you have that there, and I know I'm not going to abandon you. I'm going to stay by your side. That has created the most amazing circumstances for me to heal so much and to so healthily be able to step away from this relationship and not have my anxiety going off and not question about, should I be in, should I be out, suffering, never actually able to leave, but I should leave, but I don't. Like, all that drama, that's past now. And I'm so proud of myself that we don't have to behave like that anymore because I'm so secure in myself. But I know not everyone has the potential to just go and find a secure partner and fix things that way. But I do want to suggest that sharing with your partner that you are trying to heal this, and then asking for what you need in order to heal it, getting them on board, knowing that if their avoidance goes off, it sets off your trauma, that they could commit to showing up differently for that, or helping you work through it, or even getting a verbal agreement. We're not going to abandon each other. We're not going to ghost each other, no matter how tough this is going to get. Even if we need our own space, we're going to come back and we're going to resolve this and actually create secure people around you, create environments where you won't get abandoned by saying, hey, I've got an abandonment thing going on. If you stop talking to me in this way, if you cut back in this way, when you disconnect from me in this way, it sets off my abandonment things. Can we please not behave in that way? Then we can, like, relationships really are the only way we heal our attachment wounds. We can do a lot of work on ourselves, but at the end of the day, we need someone to attach to in a healthy way to even know that we're healing, or to have these opportunities where, unfortunately, sometimes it's very triggering, can be painful, but it is in that fertile ground of relationships that the healing happens.
Yeah. So the third part of managing abandonment fears is really to do with the behavioral strategies that we use. And I've got a few things to share there, but I just want to circle back to something that you spoke about, Erin, and that is that there's actually a roadmap for healing based on your attachment style. Many of the women that identify as having anxiousness or a fear of abandonment are also what we call the fearful avoidance style. So they can polarize, and it's a slightly different roadmap because there are extra aspects of the healing, like you mentioned, that are related to a fearful avoidance, because they also experience this feeling of panic as well too, sometimes, of not wanting to get hurt. And so I just want to outline for someone who's listening that might actually not be entirely clear, am I purely anxiously attached, or maybe I have some sort of disorganized attachment, which we call the fearful avoidance as well, which experiences anxiety, but it's slightly different. So I just want to outline the key differences, because the healing journey is a little bit different. So for a fearful avoidant person, what they generally have is more of a general fear of being hurt, and a fear of hurting others as well, but a general fear of being hurt. Whereas someone with purely anxious attachment, it's just a fear of abandonment. It's not actually a fear of getting hurt. Someone with purely anxious attachment will often dig in to the point where they just stay so long in a relationship that it's completely unhealthy, and that it's completely destructive. Whereas a fearful avoidant generally has more of a tendency to pull away, or even run from a relationship, or want to shut down from a relationship if they start to fear that they're going to get hurt. An anxiously attached person will be like, oh, you and me, great. And they'll literally just jump off the cliff without a parachute, headlong into a relationship way too fast, way too soon. Whereas someone who experiences fearful avoidance has a tendency to do that, but they also pull themselves back a little bit at times because they don't want to get hurt. And I think your behavior in this relationship right? And some of the tendencies that you've talked about on past podcasts have led me to believe there is more fearful avoidance in there than purely anxious attachment, because you've mentioned that sometimes their relationship has been like so passionate and so intense that there's been this part where you almost want to self-check yourself just to make sure that it's okay. An anxiously attached person wouldn't even second guess it.
I definitely see the avoidance in there. It doesn't come out often. And you know, I'm really fucking hurt if that's what's happening. But I feel this like switch off, just go boom, you know, like I'm out. It's cold. It's, you know, in those moments I've reflected and thought, I'm actually grateful that anxious attachment is my primary, because it feels easier to resolve. It's painful in the moment, but when that avoidance goes off, your desire to fix anything is also off. You're so switched off from the person, from the situation, from everything. To bring yourself back from that place of avoidance is very, very hard. I find it harder than what it is to pull myself back from being too attached or too anxious. Like, oh, there's that desire to want more, but you don't always even get it met. So to kind of rein yourself back into normalcy is somewhat easier. But when you're switched off, you know, it gave me a lot of compassion for why people have avoidant tendencies and why they are so not inclined to do the work and the healing. Because when that is activated or deactivated and you go into avoidance, you feel nothing. And that's a peaceful place to be when you're otherwise experiencing pain. So it's interesting that you can identify that in me. But yeah, I would completely agree.
There's a couple of other telltale signs too. I think someone with anxious attachment, the thought of being poly, it's just a hard no. Right?
God, I see that in them too. I am monogamous for life. I need that one person, and it's you and me, and it's us against the world. You know, actually, I'm so glad you said that. When I saw that in others this week, I was like, I never want to relate from anxious attachment again. Who am I if I was securely attached? Who would I be? How would I relate? What do I want for myself if I'm looking through the lens of I am a secure person versus I have a wound that I need to compensate for, which makes me unable to relate in any other way. And I need this. Like, I get why people choose that, because it's easier. And if they don't have the tenacity to do the kind of work, then yeah, sure, craft yourself a safe and comfortable life where these things aren't at risk of going off and you can get through life just fine. But that's not me. And I don't want a life that's compensating for wounding. So I've been asking myself that very question because I see it. I want monogamy. There's no doubt about that. I'm half monogamous and I'm half poly. There's the FA, like half anxiously attached, half avoidant. Like, I need openness, but I need that fucking sense of you've got my back. It's you and me against the world. But yeah, I was questioning, is that just my wounding? If I wasn't wounding, what would I want? If I wasn't wounded, what would I want? It's a fucking trippy thing to be asking myself at nearly 39 years old, looking at my life through a lens I've never looked at it through before.
Yeah, someone with anxious attachment would never ever choose to be poly. Like in some situations, they might agree in order to be able to not have their partner leave, right? But it would never ever, if you ask them, it would never ever be their choice. Like if they chose to have a partner who was 100% committed and faithful to them versus a partner that wasn't, they're never going to choose for it to be okay for their partners to be with other people.
So true, Peter. So true.
Okay, so let's talk about the behavioral side of things. And the good thing about this is it is a huge part of what can make our relationship healthy and moving through our fear of abandonment. And it's something that we can learn. It's a skill, right? When we have anxious attachment, we often think that we're really good partners because we love so hard, right? We're so committed, we're so in there, we're so willing to stay and dig in deep to save a relationship no matter what. And we're so strongly bonded and attached to our partner that we actually think that makes us good partners. And what we don't realize is that we often lack a lot of really essential relationship skills specifically around the communication side of things. So because we become so hypersensitive, so hyperactivated in our nervous system, we don't have the ability to be able to calm ourselves down very well and have the kinds of conversations that we need to create and maintain beautiful connection, especially after there's been a disconnection. We'll often doubt ourselves. Should I say something? Because we're used to being overly emotional when we speak to a partner and then not getting a good response from engaging in communications from that hyper emotional, hypersensitive, perhaps even angry. Either angry or needy. There's usually two subtypes. We're either going to helplessness and neediness, or we're going to fear and anger. We try and communicate with our partner when we feel this abandonment kick in. And so there's a few key behavioral skills that we need to learn. But the first one is actually self-soothing, obviously, and then being able to lean in and create connection with our partner when there's been disconnection. And we're typically not very good at doing that. We'll sulk, we'll sit back, we'll get angry, we'll feel hurt, we'll feel at risk, we'll feel this fear of abandonment. And it means we're not communicating properly.
Yes.
It's their fault, right? If they were
different. Yes. And the withdrawal can also make them come after you, which is another little tactic that anxious people do. It's not a true withdrawal. It's like, come chase me, come prove that I'm important. I'm going to sulk and act very hurt, because then you get to come after me. That kind of cat and mouse game.
Absolutely. It's the validation that we get used to needing. And generally there will be a pattern somewhere where we've employed that strategy as a child. So if I let my emotions go into a really high state, or if I use these tactics with mum or dad, it works somehow. I get their attention, or I get their soothing or their validation. So it's usually a perpetuated strategy for sure, but really important. A couple of the other behavioral strategies that we can learn with anxious attachment are assuming the best of others. So we're often, because we're self-protecting, we want to be hyper vigilant about putting ourselves in situations where this other person can leave us, hurt us, or abandon us. But we also then don't necessarily presume the best of others. We're often worried about what if this and what if that, and what if it goes wrong, and what if he, So learning how, like a secure person, to be able to presume the best of that other person until proven otherwise.
I love that. You and I just had a little quick chat before we hit record, and you said the exact same thing there, is secure people assume the best. And that's such a refreshing thing, A, for us to strive towards ourselves, but B, also to expect that others expect the best, to give others the benefit of the doubt, and to hold them in that high regard that they could be doing the same for us as we're doing for them. That's a beautiful foundation of a relationship, to both always assume the best of each other.
Yeah. And when we're in this heightened emotional state because some kind of disconnection's happened with our partner, we tend to make them responsible for making us feel better. And when we approach reconnecting or communication or conversations from that space, it just actually makes it worse. So learning how to communicate, still being honest with how you're feeling about something, but communicating with your partner in terms of not making them responsible for fixing it or making you feel better. So that's where obviously our self-soothing comes in, but just letting them know, this is how I feel. It's not your fault. I'm not making it your fault. I'm not making you responsible, but can we work together to try and either avoid these situations happening again, or figuring out a strategy so they're not quite as bad.
That's what I love to do. I love, after a rupture or a problem in the relationship, is to actually reflect back and say, as a couple, what do we need to do so that we don't need to do this again? And to have this commitment before you get into any kind of conflict is like, we always come back to resolve things. We always repair things. Once we're regulated again, once we've calmed our triggers, then we come back from a place of neutrality, and we fix what was damaged, and then we strategize not to get there again. So then we learn, what was the thing that set us off? Why did that happen? You know, my ethos is do it once and do it well. So we're not on the same merry-go-round, triggering off the same things, playing out the same bickering and dramas in relationship, just round and round. It's like, what do we need to do to get off the merry-go-round here? How can we actually move forward as a couple? And, you know, for me, that's a very powerful place of relating, because it does ensure that we just keep getting better and better and better over time. Emotionally, we get more and more and more connected. Whereas for a lot of relationships that I see in the world, the emotional connection is very intense and beautiful in the honeymoon stage, and then it just fades off. And they're less and less connected over time, but they're still cohabitating, or they're getting deeper and deeper into financial commitments together or having children together. But the emotional connection and the quality of the relationship is actually declining over time rather than increasing.
One of the common complaints that people who are in a relationship with us as anxious attachment have, that we perhaps don't realize, is that, like, we can be pretty intense. We can be pretty intense with these emotions. And also when things are going wrong or we're in this hyperactivated state, we can be really emotional. And sometimes we can actually be quite angry. We're actually more acclimatized to that level of activation in our nervous system. And so often people in a relationship with someone with anxious attachment will say they're just not used to that same degree of intensity. Like we might scream and yell and be really like hyper emotional, and our partner's nervous system just is not necessarily acclimatized to that. So it can actually feel for them really insensitive, and like we don't care about their feelings, or actually don't realize the impact that our hyper regulation is having on them, because they're just used to having more of a calmer state of being. So just another thing for anyone with anxious attachment to remember is it can come across sometimes as controlling or just insensitive of our partner's emotions, which we don't realize because we just think we're being really passionate and loving.
Yeah. I can completely identify that in my life too. Thank you very much, Peter. And me, the most intense woman on the planet, so much power inside of me. Wait till I unleash my emotions. Like, you can't not know that that's happening. And that is a lot. It's a lot for a lot of people. So kudos to my man, who is actually very capable of staying in that space with me, knowing that that's not his natural habitat, knowing that his resilience in there is lower, his emotional resilience. He'll come and meet me there. He'll hold me there while I'm in it. And then he needs recalibration time, and he needs alone time to go and get what he needs to be able to come back. So thank you very much, lover.
And the key that you said there, though, is that you're not making it his fault. You're giving him an opportunity to hold space and help you, essentially, or support you through that, and then giving them some space. So particularly, I know with men, like these really highly emotional, passionate relationships, the more time a man spends in that space with us, the more it actually depletes his testosterone till he starts to feel not in his power. It starts to feel a little bit off. As women, we can spend days and days and days in this beautifully connected, deep emotional space, right? But it's completely normal for any man to want to step away just to replenish and recharge himself and his testosterone levels as well.
Well, Peter, as always, this is so fucking amazing, and I could talk to you forever. But if we're going to summarize it today, as really powerful steps forward for people who have identified that they have a fear of abandonment. What's the most powerful way to move forward?
I would say the first step would be to look at, how can I be responsible for my own emotions myself? Right? So how can the path to healing the trauma and the wounding from abandonment, it's a journey. It's definitely a journey. And both you and I are more than happy to support any woman that wants to take that journey as well. But being responsible for your own emotions, I think, is the thing we don't realize that we do. We've outsourced that responsibility literally our whole life and haven't learned those tools. So look at that first, then do the healing, and then you can obviously learn healthy, secure relationship behaviors after that, that will really set you up to have a beautiful relationship that's unlike anything that you've had before, thankfully.
Yeah, and that's amazing. And I do want to give hope to anyone that feels like they've been working on this and that they haven't got results, or that they're just projecting stuff from past relationships into their future relationships. It is a lifelong journey. There's no miracle cure that takes our fear of abandonment away from us after 5 sessions with a therapist and then we're done. It's something that we continually apply ourselves to, and the results do continue to get better and better and better. And no doubt that it will show up again in my life. I don't fool myself to think I'm all done of this work now. No, I've graduated from this level of the lesson, and then the next level comes along. So I do want to let everyone know that there's hope, there's peacefulness, there's security, there's love, there's safety, there's everything available to us if we commit ourselves to just continually doing the work and release ourselves of the expectations that it's to be fixed quickly, or that we should be fixed already, or that we've failed if it's still showing up. Just have love and compassion with yourself throughout this journey, because it's a big and long and a deep one. And like you say, Peta, it's ancestral. It's in our lineage. It's in our DNA. It's a wound of humanity since the beginning of time. And we're just so lucky and blessed to be in this circumstance and to be at this level of consciousness and to have these kind of resources available, that healing is actually possible. The generations before us didn't have this. They didn't have the technologies. They didn't have the knowledge. They didn't have the awareness to even identify it. You know, I think how much I go and Google. When I want to heal something in myself, I can go and find podcasts. I can go and find blogs. I can go and find a coach. I was thinking about my parents who were in their early 20s when they had me, and there was a lot of dysfunction. There was a lot of abuse. Where the fuck would they have turned? There was no Google. There was no resource. There was no identifying what the problem was. There was no one talking about it. You would just know that you're fucked up and just do your best to not be fucked up. But yes, perhaps there were still psychologists and things like that, but the resources that we have today, and the fact that this is a commonplace conversation, and the fact that you're listening to this on a podcast that you can access for free at any time and share with others, like, we're so fucking lucky to be alive at this time and to be healing at this time. It's just so possible for all of us, and what that means for our ancestors, and what that means for our families, and what that means for our future children. We're just so fucking lucky.
I have a healing anxious attachment recommendations guide, which has books, tools, resources in there, which I'm happy to make available for your audience as well.
That would be amazing. Thank you. Please do. We'll put that in the show notes, a link there, and you can we'll put all Peta's contact, and she is amazing and brilliant at what she does. So if you identify with anything that she's sharing, please go and work with her. She will change your life. Thank you so much, Peta. It's been amazing to have you here, and I know we'll be having you back again soon. So as always, everyone, I hope that you've enjoyed this episode. We would love to hear from you. Please, you can find us both via Instagram and share the love. Ask any questions that you have. Let us know what your key takeaways were. And as always, make sure you subscribe and share this episode. Until next time, laugh loud and fuck louder.